So while tillage might be necessary in organic, it doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of ways to reduce tillage. There are more general strategies to reduce tillage on any farm, organic or not. We got cover crops, interseeding, strip tillage, and perennial and solid seeded phases in the rotation, just to name a few. There are plenty of videos and other resources out there discussing these, and we've linked to a couple of those in the lesson notes. But let's instead focus on a few examples of tillage reduction in organic specific settings. So first, let's talk about how cover crops can help reduce tillage. Continuous organic no-till isn't a reality yet, but tillage-free growing seasons are possible. The more accurate term for the system that some researchers use is organic cover crop-based rotational reduced till production. So while organic no-till is a little more hopeful than accurate, it is a heck of a lot easier to say. Many of these strategies are being applied in conventional systems as well and are by no means solely an organic innovation. Probably the most common and predictably effective is frost seeding into standing winter wheat, or even some spring planted small grains. In northern climates, you can frost seed red clover or another legume into standing wheat somewhere around 15 to 20 pounds per acre. It grows beneath the maturing wheat, and once the wheat comes off, you have a great nitrogen fixing cover crop. One study in Nebraska estimated that clover adds around 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre for the following crop, usually corn, and an Iowa State publication covers the basics of the practice. See the lesson notes. Next is interseeding into corn. Many conventional farmers have had success using this method, and organic farmers are working to figure out how to best adapt it to their systems. Early season cultivation is still necessary until about V5 or V6, when farmers will come in with modified drills, broadcast seeders, high boys, or even airplanes to get a cover crop planted between the corn rows. There are lots of options for which cover crops to plant, from annual rye to vetch to clover and beyond. The crop will emerge and grow very slowly until the canopy dies back, at which point the cover crop should take off and provide some nice fall cover. There are some good best practices to follow, and the agronomists at Albert Lee Seed House and Dr. Aaron Silva at UW-Madison lay those out in their publications in the lesson notes. Cover crop-based no-till soybeans. I'm betting that if you've heard anything about organic no-till, this is probably it. The only tillage or cultivation event will be the fall before planting soybeans when establishing the cover crop. Dr. Aaron Silva at UW has been working on this system for over a decade and has it down to a literal science. Links to her videos and resources with many more details are included in the lesson notes. But let's cover the basics here.
Hi, this is Anders breaking in my video editing studio today to let you know that we were lucky enough to interview Leah Vereecke, who currently works for the Rodale Institute as an agronomist, but previous to that worked for Dr. Aaron Silva, who we just mentioned. And Leah was actually the one who ran all of Aaron's trials. So through hands-on experience over many years, has also become one of the nation's foremost experts on organic no-till soybeans. And so we're going to be interspersing her advice and observations for the next many minutes. So lucky enough to gain from her experience. Enjoy.
Fall. It's cover crop establishment time. Plant a heavy seeding of rye, 3 bushels an acre, earlier than you would normally plant a fall-seeded cover crop. Other overwintering small grains have also been tried, and some can work depending on your region, but rye is the most predictably effective. For sufficient biomass in the spring, you'll want to get it in before September 30th in the northern states. Planting dates are obviously dependent on your geography.
So when planting organic no-till soybeans, it's always good to take a step back and think about the rotation. It's something that we can forget to think about, but it can be hard to integrate organic no-till soybeans in the rotation for different reasons. One being the fact that you have to plant the rye early, so you need a crop that's out of the field by early September. So it generally cannot be corn. Corn for silage can work, but most of the time I would not recommend planting corn before that, which means doing it after small grain or other minor crops like peas, buckwheat, sunflower can also be a good way to do it. Another thing that should be thought through is the crop that comes after. and that crop should probably not be wheat. In general, there will be contamination of the following crop if it's a winter cereal by the rye that will regrow after the soybean. Wheat contamination by rye regrowth is a big issue, and we've had a lot of farmers complain about that, so something I would recommend against. When it comes time to pick your rye, using a variety, any of them, is actually the best option you can have. So I'm saying that as opposed to what we call VNS rye, which stands for a variety non-stated. This means that it can be a mix of different varieties, and the antithesis will then not be reached at the same time for every variety in the mix, which means that termination will not be ideal. Looking at something that works well on your farm, has good standability and good biomass production is really what you're looking for. Nutrient is also very important in that system, so making sure there is enough nitrogen available for the rye to tiller in the fall, having a good seed bed, basically treating the rye cover crop as you would treat your crop.
The next spring is cover crop termination and planting. To succeed, a farmer will need dry biomass in the range of about 8 to 10,000 pounds an acre. That's a thick stand, and you can probably just disappear into it.
What I like to recommend is to go in March or April when the snow is getting off the ground, when it's getting a little warmer, when the rye is barely starting to grow again, and really look over and see what you have as a stand. See how thin or thick it is, how even it is, and from there decide whether you want to go organic no-till or not. If you decide to go with it and that you have enough rye present there on the ground, you would need to let the rye grow until it reaches antithesis. So antithesis is the flowering stage of the rye. It can be seen because the anthers are coming out of the heads, and the pollen is also coming out of it. The best time to plant the soybeans and kill the rye is when antithesis is getting to the end. Antithesis starts in the middle of the rye head and goes up and down at the same time. The way you will know that antithesis is about to be over is when the anthers are coming from the top and the bottom of the head. If the anthers are coming from the center, antithesis is just starting, and you might just give it a few days before antithesis ends, and it's actually the best time to terminate the rye. When it comes to choosing a roller crimper, I always recommend farmers to go with their budget. The I&J roller crimper, which is manufactured by I&J but uses the Rodale design, which is the chevron pattern, is usually the cheapest one on the market at this point. There are used ones that are available, or you can get a new one from I&J. You can also get the blueprints for free on the Rodale website and build your own roller crimper, or ask your local mechanic to do so. There are newer roller crimpers like the down roller crimper that have hydraulic down pressure, which are a little pricier, but they can also have big advantages. They're composed of smaller crimpers that adapt to the topography of your fields much better than just a large 10 feet or 15 feet wide piece of steel like the Rodale roller crimper is.
There are more and more roller crimper options out there. Links to just a few are included in the lesson notes. Timing is super important here. If you miss the window, the rye will be a bigger problem than any weed you're trying to control. You might want to take your allergy meds before you go into the fields, because I'm going to be honest, it can be a sneezy deal.
When you've identified that the rye has reached the end of antithesis, it's time to come plant the soybeans into the rye and cream the rye. It can be done all at once with the roller crimper mounted in the front of the tractor and the planter in the back, but it can also be done in a two-pass operation with planting the soybeans before crimping the rye and coming the day after or the same day and terminating the rye.
You can do narrower rows for faster canopy, but many choose 30-inch rows to allow for a rescue treatment in case weeds escape. Your seeding rate will be higher than you're used to, 225,000 seeds per acre or even higher, and you may need to modify your planter to get through that thick mulch.
But most of the time, I would recommend starting with adding way to the planter, which is going to help a lot getting through the mat and getting in the ground to get really good seed to soil contact. So adding way in the form of water in a tank or seed bags on the planter or anything that you can think of. In our research planter, for example, we had steel sheets that were in the frame of the planter to add weight to it. So be creative in ways that you can add weigh on the planter with things that you can find on your farm.
Late spring and summer is a time to focus on your other fields, because if a farmer has done this right, they can mostly forget about it outside of scouting and checking on it now and then. If it's looking good and the weather's cooperated, you shouldn't have to be back in the field until harvest. If there's considerable weed pressure, high residue cultivators or weed zappers can be used, depending on which weeds you're dealing with.
Using a high residue cultivator, which is basically a large sweep with a cut disc in front of it for some brands of it, can be useful if there is a little bit of a weed outbreak in your system. It will help control the weeds between the rows. Another newer tool, more recent development, is the weed zapper, which is also another good option to control weeds when they have come through the rye. That would happen a little later in the season than the high residue cultivator. One would need to wait for the weeds to be above the soybean canopy to come and terminate them. The weed zapper doesn't work as effectively on grasses than it does on broadleaves, and it doesn't work on all broadleaves. So it's not a perfect tool, but it can be a good plan B to avoid weed seed production.
Fall is harvest, and seeing how well a farmer's first crack at organic no-till went. In replicated trials in high fertility fields in Wisconsin, no-till beans are at least competitive with till beans and often comparable. Some growers report a 10% yield hit, while others don't. We've seen this practice implemented from Georgia to New York to the Dakotas with increasingly predictable success.
If you want to adopt this system in other states than Midwestern states, in different climates, the main difference will be the rye planting date. In higher latitude, planting the rye earlier will be key. So, for example, in Minnesota or the Dakotas, you may have to plant your rye by September 10. Going a little further south, climates that are a little warmer, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, those farmers can probably plant their rye a little later, maybe up until the middle of October, but that's something you would need to experiment on your own farm or look for local experimentations.
It's taken years to get right, but organic finally has a pretty dependable no-till option for at least one of the staple crops in many rotations. Corn hasn't been so easy, and lots of folks are working on how to crack that nut. Baby steps, though. No matter how you feel about tillage, it can't be argued that implementing strategies to reduce it is a good idea. We've come a long way in the last few decades, and we have more good minds than ever working on this issue. From no-tillers turned organic farmers to organic farmers turned aspiring no-tillers. It's an exciting frontier in the quest to optimize organics across the world, and we're really glad you're joining us on this journey towards less tillage in organics.